In this video, I'm going to talk about tree guards. So a bit of background, you might be able to see the road along there. You can certainly hear it if you can't see it. But this land, I've driven past it very often. This is just down the road from my house. And I've always considered this private land. This was always fenced off and there was actually stock grazed in here. Then recently I saw these tree guards going in. So obviously someone was doing planting and they had made a new fence along the front. And part of that fence was a low gate, one you can step over. And I thought, oh, that's very odd if it is private land. So I looked it up and this is actually public land and I've never known. So it's opened up a new area for me to explore, which is fantastic. It's opened up a dam that I'm quite excited about. But I thought I'd come down for a look and talk about these tree guards because they're actually a wonderful invention. I mean, use less plastic always if you can, but in terms of regenerating an area, these work quite well. I've never seen ones as good as these. The ones I've used haven't been this good, but I thought I'd take the opportunity to talk about them and why they are good or an appropriate technology for this purpose. Here's a closer look at that water hole. I'm hopeful there might be some yabbies in there. So once I find out the legality of doing so, I'm going to put some yabby pots in there and see what we find. So it's pretty obvious when this place was replanted that it was sprayed. I mean, I don't use sprays on my property unless I absolutely have to, but I'm not anti-spray per se. I'm just anti the overuse of sprays. And so again, appropriate technology, trying to clear this area of weeds by hand on any sort of budget would have just been impractical. So they've gone through, they've obviously sprayed and cleared the lantana that was here before. There are some weeds still around. This one's fireweed, an absolute horrible weed. Maybe I'll do a video on that at some stage because I have it on my property as well. It's all around the place. There's some 1, 2, 3 bushes just in front of you. So it's a weed that's persisted, and obviously some of the perennial grasses are coming back, which is actually a good thing. But other than that, it's a blank slate other than the regeneration that's going on the planted trees. So I've looked around at these trees and there's a whole bunch of species, lots of acacia, some Grevillea robusta, it looks like the silky oak. That one's a callistemon. So there's a whole different eucalypt probably. I'm no expert on Australian trees. So there's a whole bunch of native species that have gone in. Now these are no doubt, there are plans online. I actually found one when I was looking up this area. Plants that are suggested for regeneration of this particular creek. And I hazard a guess that these plants are all off that list because this is to protect water flowing into the creek. That pond you saw is actually part of a larger creek system. And so not only will regenerating this area create a whole bunch more habitat for native wildlife, it'll also clean up the creek and help improve that system as well. So the tree guards are essentially a core flute, rigid plastic triangular prism with 2 open ends. And they slide over the young, freshly planted trees to protect them. They protect them from foraging, they protect them from wind damage, they'll protect them from machinery as people are working around these. Obviously there was a fair bit of work done here, so if they weren't marked it could have been very easy to destroy a large number of trees as they were doing so. They also protect the trees from frost. Now most of these species being native to this area are frost resistant, but not always so when they're this small. Usually when they're growing at this stage they'd be covered by a canopy, which we don't have here. It's an open field. So they do protect to some extent from frost. I actually had a young mango tree in a tree guard like this and it was completely protected from the frost that we get at my house. Other trees around it were damaged. It was quite safe in one of these tree guards. Now obviously your mileage may vary. If you're in a very cold place that's not going to work, but in the subtropics here where we get a minor frost it worked well for that. You can see there's 2 slots down the side, and so basically you plant your tree. Well, you probably drive your stake first, plant your tree, and then you slip the tree guard over the stake, and that keeps it in place, stops it moving about. It's a very effective, cheap, quick, long-lasting system. Now, when you are done with your tree guard, what do? Well, they can be recycled. Generally, I don't think council recycles them. So my first lot I actually got when I did a bit of a cleanup in a unconnected section of bush, and there were tree guards there. Basically, the trunks of the trees had filled out the tree guards, so they'd been on a long time. Almost all of those I actually had to cut off, but there were some that were just able to be slipped off the top of the tree, and that's where I actually got a couple to experiment with from. So they do last a long time and they can definitely be recycled. I didn't like that they'd just been left in the bush like that though. And so as the tree grows up, it'll continue out the top. You can see this one's already put on some size and was probably a bit taller when it was planted anyway. This is eucalypt, I believe. And so it'll grow up out the top, and then once it's, you know, what's that, 6.5 feet, you could slide the tree guard up over the top, as that tree no longer needs protection. If you let it go much longer than that, you're going to have to cut it off, which is a shame because they can be recycled. The spacing that's been used is quite close, maybe 1.5 to 2 meters. And as I walk across, you can see wherever a tree hasn't survived, they've put the tree guard on a lean. I don't know if that's to let them know to remove that one or to replant it. I'm not quite sure, but I did notice that. So it's about 1.5 to 2 meters, and as I move across, you can see they're planted in rows. This is obviously far too many trees for this bit of ground to sustain in the end. But the idea of planting more than you need is that you get a very quick forest happening. So very quickly, this bit of land will get a canopy, and you'll start getting the native wildlife moving back in. You'll get the forest floor building. You'll get this grass disappearing as it's shaded out, which is what you want with regeneration. And then obviously your trees will compete for that space, and you'll have your winners and your losers and your final forest canopy with probably an understory that we can't even see yet and a whole new bunch of plants. So that's why they are planted so densely. Not every tree will make it. So I was blown away by the amount of planting that was done down here. I just thought I'd make a video on it and focus it around what these are and what they're used for. I hope you found it interesting. Have a good one.